from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. There's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a chance.
Dude, Joey, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
See you, and thanks for the hospitality.
Yeah. Hey, for those of you that don't know Joey Abdullah, the one thing that comes to mind with me for you is like a master networker. I don't think there's anybody in the mortgage industry, certainly not in the state of Colorado, that doesn't know who you are. I feel like you're super involved. You're involved in all kinds of different industries, very involved in the mortgage space and in the coaching space. So for those that don't know who you are, who's Joey Abdullah?
All right, so you got to tell me how far back you want me to go, but
Yeah. Well, how long have you been in the mortgage business?
so coming up on about 2011, 12.
Okay.
when
Okay.
I
So
first got
right
into this.
as we were coming out of the crash, you got into the business.
Right as a lot of people said it was the worst time.
Uh-huh. Did you find it was the worst time or a great time?
I mean, I jumped in
Mm-hmm.
and realized it was a pretty good opportunity, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole on what this industry still lacks, but it was lacking a lot of advice. Being able to purchase a home, my wife and I, our first home purchase, I was in the military for quite a while, and it was a VA loan. And I think a lot of people have a similar story of that a friend or family or themselves that had a pretty unique or bad experience, and it exposed me to the opportunity that would have. And so dug into the industry a little bit. I had envisioned when I left the military that I was going to get into a financial advisor type role. I've always liked talking to people about money, finances, the future, different products. But I didn't really ever feel comfortable that I wanted to go sell any of those products, whether it was an insurance product or sell, an annuity or even, dabbling in stocks or bonds. And so what was cool about this industry was I could talk about those products. I could give true advice. And it was valuable advice that I wasn't gaining anything off of. And so they came across more sincere, and it filled in a lot of the puzzle pieces that I think people need when they're talking about buying a home or just their finances in general. Typically are a second afterthought type mentality. So I got into the industry while I was still actually in the military. So I was active duty and
What branch?
in the Navy.
Navy. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how much further back to go. You said I get into the mortgage industry. So kind of just fell into it. Like I said, had a bad experience.
Did you just see the mortgage industry as an option out there, or were you recruited? Did you have friends in the industry at the time, and were you living in Colorado at the time?
I was. We just moved to Colorado. I
Okay.
got stationed actually downtown, kind of in the recruiting type realm.
Okay.
And if anybody ever has any background in the military, I worked at the Denver MEPS. It's a military processing station.
Okay.
Kind of Uncle Sam's filter, I call it, where somebody that wants to join the military, Marines, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, they would come to a MEPS. There's about 65 of them around the country, I want to say. And a recruiter from maybe a strip mall, Marine Corps, let's say, would bring out an applicant for the Marine Corps. And that's where they would have their aptitude testing. Are you going to be a pilot or a plumber? What days are available to head off to basic training? And then you would usually swear in, file some paperwork. It's a job, right? So you're enrolling into your branch of service. You're enlisting typically for a set number of years, and all that contractual paperwork would get done. Come back at a later date for your shipping date, and that's when you'd head off into your respective basic training and join the military. And what was great about that job, and if anybody's listening to this, it's still guaranteed this way. It's a DMV, right? It's tons of folks coming in and out of there all day long, not in a good or bad way. Just it operates very well. It's an efficient, assembly line type thing. And so my role was just kind of overseeing that assembly line. And so I had a bunch of free time. And so it was interesting. I was downtown Denver, and I remember getting, my mindset of I was planning on leaving the military. We were going to move to Colorado, or stay in Colorado. And I remember, I'm in my Navy uniform. I'm walking around downtown Denver, and I'm going to banks and broker shops and correspondent lenders. I didn't know what any of these were called. I was literally Googling mortgage, and I barged into still a good friend of mine to this day, barged into a small broker shop. It was the broker and his processor. And barged in there in my uniform, just like, hey, how does this all work? Right. And this is a true story. That just barged in there, and I remember processor, I won't name any names, but he's sitting on one of those bouncing balls, ergomatic, whatever they're called, and backwards hat, and just small shop downtown. And I said, hey, how does this all work? He's like, oh, do you need a mortgage? I said, no, I already got one. But like, I want to know what you do. Like, how does this work?
Wait, so you just randomly barged in there?
Multiple
or was
places.
there a reason? So you were doing research online.
I genuinely wanted to learn how the mortgage industry worked. And
was this before you bought a house or after?
It was after.
Okay, so you had an experience, right? Like I always think with VA loans in particular, it's such a phenomenal loan product, and there's not a lot of great education around it. So here you were, you have a VA benefit, you decide to buy a house with your wife. That experience was subpar?
I went through the experience that I think a lot of people end up doing, which is why I like just taking action. I think a lot of what I want to talk about today is just going out and doing something, right? I can read about it, but I want to go do it. And so we were moving here from San Diego. I was stationed out there, and then ended up being receiving orders out to Colorado. Never moved out here, right? Didn't know what I was doing. So I did the Navy Federal USAA. Why not? That's what I know.
Yeah.
I've banked with them for 20 years at that point. And so didn't really understand maybe not what I was getting into, but I didn't know what else to do, right? So this is a normal experience. And so another normal experience ended up.
Did your agent not make an introduction?
That's what I was going to allude to.
Okay.
Then the agent said, hey, by the way, you should talk to this guy. And I'd asked her for a recommendation because I didn't know anything. And I felt like I was reasonably intelligent, but a VA loan, you just see 0%, no fees. You just see a lot of like free type wording. And I remember seeing the initial estimates back then. It was the good faith estimate. And I remember seeing it. And I was like, wow, I got to bring like $11,000 or something to closing. And I'm like, this is wrong, right? It's supposed to be zero. Like you did a typo of quite a few $1,000. And the guy was pretty condescending towards me and my wife. Who do you think's paying the closing costs? I don't know. I don't know what is a closing cost, right? And so that's the beginning of like, okay, there's some education. You need some advice. And so got introduced to this guy, and he wasn't bad. It was just more of, I was an afterthought I could feel, but he got my number a lot closer to the zero. Right. And I know now what he likely did. There's margin and there's ways to premium price something, but it got me my goal, which was I didn't really care about the extra $80 on the payment. Likely at that point, I wanted that closer to zero. And so after we closed on the house, like I said, I was walking around downtown, ended up in this broker shop, and I wanted to actually know how this worked. Right. And I remember going in there, and he said, well, how this works, and maybe he was trying to get me out of his office or anything, but how this works is it's black and white. There's guidelines. And he gave me a couple pieces of advice that I talked to him today, and he still doesn't remember telling me this, but it made me a lot of money. He said, hey, if you learn the guidelines that are black and white and you learn them better than an underwriter, you're going to make a ton of money. If you understand that and realize that this is a sales role, like you got to shake people's hands, you'll do very well. And so I'm a quick study. Okay, great. That was my first coach in the mortgage industry, I'll call it. And he said, hey, I could show you some of the files we have in process. I've got a couple closing tomorrow, next week. It would be better if you brought in your own deals. And here's how you get licensed. He gave me the whole scenario. But if they're your own client, they're your own deals, you'll learn a lot better. Start to end. And I think he was trying to kick me out of his office. No joke. Literally the next day, I brought him 2 names. I said, hey, this person wants to buy a house. This person wants to refi. And I think he probably thought like the sky opened up and like money just fell in his lap.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, who's this guy coming in my office? We would all love that guy to come in our office and hold on, this is real. Yeah, they're expecting you to call them today. Yeah, right. Don't make me look bad here.
That's hilarious.
And both those deals closed, finished getting my license and everything. And I saw what the checks were. I was like, wow, this is, more of the typo type thing. The closing costs were off in this. And it wasn't just the money. It was more of like the opportunity, the excitement of learning something new. My wife, if she's listening to this, she'll attest to this, that I was up till 2, 3 in the morning, like learning guidelines. MRI guidebooks. I mean, everything I could just to like learn the industry. And it just helped me to be comfortable talking to folks like, oh, I'm pretty sure what that guy or gal explained to you was wrong. When I got into this industry, I remember talking to a lot of people that, I don't know if there's a training on this, but everybody likes to say how long they've been doing this. I've been doing this 20 years, 30 years. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, once I catch up to you and I learn this industry and I learn the current, I don't care what loans existed pre-pandemic,
sure.
not pandemic, but pre-2008. Once I catch up to what is existing today, I'm going to smoke all you guys, right? Because I'm going to outwork you guys. And I think that is a very similar feeling that we have right now, right? Can you imagine coming in today, just, you don't know any better, rates are rates. And it's tough when we have the curse of knowledge to remember what it's like to not know something. So that's actually a blessing for anybody that's coming in the last 18 months.
I think a lot of people are, they were exposed to the industry over the last 5 years, right? And saw how much money we were making. And now they've decided to get into it. And it's like, on one hand, it's like, man, I can't help but in the back of my mind think like, you picked a tough time to get into the industry. But, I had moved from California in 2010, got back into the business at about 2012. And it's like, I didn't know any better either, right? It was just, I was working my ass off because I needed to make a name for myself. I wanted to make money. I knew that there was money in the industry because I had previous experience, but it was a whole different world at that point, right? Like you weren't doing 6-point pay option arms, right? Like guidelines had changed, disclosures were different, the process was a little different. But at the end of the day, it was all sales. One thing I've really admired about you is you've been great with attraction rather than promotion. Like, I think that you do a great job at educating people, at talking about the idea of something without hard selling somebody. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your approach when it comes to meeting with an agent or with a client that might be different than somebody that's like we'll just call it a true salesperson.
So a true salesperson, do you mean more of, just so I can unpack that question, do you mean more as somebody that is pushy, is a salesy
maybe
individual?
It doesn't have to be somebody that's pushy, but somebody where you feel like they're trying to sell you instead of trying to educate you and attracting that individual to your way of thinking.
Got it. So I'll start with where the market is right now. Depending on when somebody's listening to this is the market. There's no, this date is going to happen. There's no, hey, when rates fall. This is the market, right? And so I'll always start there with what can you truly affect? You can affect your advice. You can affect how this looks, right? Something that our team has been doing quite a bit of recently is just exposing people to this is the reality, right? Rates are, starting with a 6, 7, 8 in front of them. And that's not ideal, right? But if you start taking a look at, we're helping this young lady, first-time home buyer, makes a ton of money, and she's never bought a house before. She's single and pretty expensive home. And what's great about this is when we start doing some advice-driven consultation, like, hey, here's where we are, but here's the actual picture, and we're showing her net effective rate. If you start taking a look at, some potential tax benefits of owning a home, obviously I always put the asterisks behind me to talk to the accountants, but this is on the IRS website, so you probably are going to be able to do this. And I mean, her effective rate's like 4.3, right? So almost $1,000 a month of a differential. That's meaningful, right? So now when you start taking a look at her decision making, she can prioritize, maybe she updates something with HR for her deductions. But I think that type of advice, that's one singular, thought or opportunity. But having those types of pointed conversations, I was talking to somebody recently, and now I'm going to get on a roll with this here because it's a good question. And I like to have in these conversations that what the market needed, let's say 2-3 years ago, when we were having a heyday, let's say, I just needed to pick up the phone, right? People were calling, all of us. I just need to pick up the phone first or faster than somebody else. Reasonably close in rate. I mean, everybody was. And then more importantly, I just needed to be top of mind to get that first phone call, right? So we were a very social type industry. I needed to be top of mind. I would go talk to 30, 40 referral partners, real estate agents, CPAs, financial advisors, attorneys. And I just need to be that guy, that business card, that phone number that was given out first, even if it was a couple of them, right? Just speed to that lead. Right now, there's folks that, we're doing 100, 200 million plus a year, doing, 3 loans year to date, right? And I think what that shows is they're not doing anything wrong. Just this market is rewarding something else. That market was rewarding being top of mind. This market, I believe, we have an affordability crisis. This market's rewarding advice and consistency. Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's changed I also think it's changed with the way agents are responding, because lenders for such a long time have done nothing but call and hammer agents. And I think agents are in the same boat as we are, right? Like they're dealing with the same objections on the front lines, but they may not always have the education behind them, right? It's like they've got the contacts, we've got the content. We have the ability to educate them using real numbers and math. But are we being consistent with educating the agent so that they continue to think of us as top of mind? But it may not be the same like happy hour that you go and just buddy with an agent on.
Correct.
Right?
You want to be top of mind for when they refer you, you're a reflection of their business. If they if they refer anybody to you, the agent is way more in tune today with wanting to understand what that experience is going to be like, your ability to communicate well, your ability to not just get the deal done. I think there's still, I don't know where they are. Some folks that just completely blow up deals, but closing in a couple of weeks, if that's a requirement, I don't believe is a difficult scenario for almost anybody.
I always say the perfect amount of time is like 3 weeks. I don't want it to be longer than that, and we're doing 2-week closes, not a big deal. Maybe a little bit of pressure, which I like a little bit of pressure. I would say 3 weeks is perfect, right? Too much longer than that, I think people have too much time to think and wonder, and they think they're going to get some better deal, and the dirty secret is we're really all the same. We're basically all the same, right? Everybody's within about probably 0.25% of each other in rate. It's just how they're adjusting the margins to show what they want to show, and are they making any money?
Yeah, and I think there's an opportunity for us we keep going back to advice and education. We can slow down, right? When we were order taking, it really was lock the deal, get it in the assembly line, and magically a loan came out the other end, signed some paperwork, and you got the refinance, you got a new house that you ended up paying $100,000 over list price, waived everything, right? You talk about stress and like timelines and everything. Right now, even with a 2-week close, even with 3, even with some longer closes, we can breathe, we can relax. Hey, let's just make sure we're setting this up correctly, and I would guess you're seeing the same thing, that sitting down and the clients that appreciate that sort of a interaction with you and your team, that it doesn't feel rushed. Because like you said, with the salesy guy, that you can feel it's sales, you can feel if someone's rushing you through something.
Absolutely.
You can feel it's not that it feels good or bad. It's just, I tell this to a lot of folks, this is a big decision. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're looking at a 30-year loan, but we're probably looking, I think we got bit as an industry last couple of years, like, well, it's around the corner, specific date, this is going to happen. Because what else did we know, right? We had trends going down for well over a decade. Why wouldn't it in the next 6 months have gone down? But now if we assume we're looking at, a shorter horizon, maybe not 30 years, but 2 to 3 years, let's look at those types of loan scenarios. Let's look at, this property for being, your 7 to 10 year property, whether you turn this into a rental, but that's all education, right? There's a saying that I like to say as well, that when you talk to a client, and real estate agents do really well with this as well, there's no such thing as a forever home. Really, there's this season of your life home. And same exact thing ends up happening with, what we do on the lending side. So
it's like, how many people have you helped with home ownership where like, this is it? This is the forever home. They believe that they're going to be in this house for longer than 10 years. And the reality is life happens, right? It's like maybe you have a family member that's sick and you've got to sell, you've got to cash out, or, income changes, jobs change, life just changes. So what are they saying now? Every 4 to 7 years is about the amount of time it takes somebody to buy, sell, or refinance. I want to talk a little bit about prospecting, because you said that the market's rewarding something different. And of course, before you and I got involved in the core, we were just kind of doing our own thing. We had seen some success. Then we entered into this sort of this training company that was really big on system, structure, and process. And now both of us have left the core and venturing into different things within the industry. But what is it that you have kept the same from that training? And what is it that you've changed, or that you've allowed yourself to change when it comes to prospecting specifically?
So I've been blessed. We had a good run for quite a while, and I practiced what I preached and saved a ton of money, right? Commission breath is a real thing. That's the salesy thing you alluded to earlier. Truly right now, I wouldn't say it's a full reset, but what I've leaned into, this is where I'm going to go. I've leaned into naturally what I get energized by. If I generated or I received 30 leads on a weekend, let's just say, crazy amount, right? Big team that would handle that, or whatever it would be. That's not as fulfilling as somebody on my team saying, oh my God, I got 2 new contracts. I got this just happened. I'm leaning way more into that. Like, that truly has been beneficial. I can now see, the direction that I'm steering it is now I get to advise. It's almost like a layer up, right? I'm advising others on stuff that, maybe I wish I would have had somebody advise me on. And why I kind of bring that up is same thing with referral partners. Maybe it's because you can see from the outside, like, hey, here's what I would do, or you're focusing on this. And so I've always been, in somewhat of a entrepreneurial type mindset. And so now just helping folks with their own versions of structure, their own opportunities, right? If somebody is, being taken advantage of by a marketing organization, I love stepping in and like, hey, here's actually what they're doing. I've reverse engineered all these guys of what they're doing online. Here's how you could do it yourself. If you just need a little bit of help, these guys over here will do it for a lot lower of an amount of money, because here's exactly how,
by the way,
this works.
What do you think the end game has been for you when it comes to like reverse engineering these scenarios, right? Because I think that's a gift that you have, being able to see what the end game is for somebody else and going, what the hell are they doing? And I know you've spent a lot of time reverse engineering those scenarios. Do you think that comes from a place of like really wanting to help people, or is it a combination of that and, hey, if I figure this out, there's a financial opportunity in it for me?
I'm a capitalist, so yes, I'll always look at ways to earn income, but I believe it comes, right? So, and I believe this is on a couple of my social media profiles, but I love being an impactful connector. Right? You brought that up at the beginning of this podcast, and thanks for like seeing that. That's where I truly thrive. And connections of what? People, and then information, right? I didn't make this up, but I'll steal and butcher, a lot of folks that are more successful than me. their adage, but again, I learn fast and I'll just take advantage of learning as much as I can, that you really are only like a person or a piece of information away from like your next step closer to your goal, whether it's to make $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, have a jet, own a company. It doesn't matter what your goal is. You want to be on a professional, sports team. You're typically a connection away, right? Whether it's a person or some information. I truly believe that. And so when I go and reverse engineer, let's say an advertisement, a funnel, if I go reverse engineer the way that, a real estate company is structured, a lot of people are like, oh, this multi-level marketing. Well, let's actually see what's happening. What are they offering you? What's actually, the business proposition here? I like taking apart businesses and systems so that I can curate kind of the best opportunities, I guess, and help somebody maybe take a shortcut to finding the best one. Does that make sense? Because I'm trying to unpack it. Nobody's ever asked me that, so thank you. But me being an impactful connector, I do find value in like, you know what, Derek, you mentioned these 3 things you want to go do. You need to go talk to this guy. I'm going to connect you guys. I need to connect you with, this company, this software, this system.
So here's my thing. I feel like I'm a really good connector as well, right? And I think probably a lot of us in the industry are that way, but where I sometimes have a hard time looking at it going, okay, and I'm happy to just connect somebody for the sake of connecting, but then if you're trying to monetize that connection, how do you do that? Where does the monetization come from over time? Is it just that there's karmic equity and karmic debt in that relationship, and you putting somebody in touch with somebody else and they have the ability to make a lot of money and think back to you, so that when you have an offer, they're more likely to say yes to it?
I'll give you 2 examples that quickly come to me because I haven't really had any time to think through this. So good questions. One, let's say it's a loan that maybe my organization can do, but you have that feeling like, you know what, we can do that, but we're really we're not good at it. We don't do too many of them, right? There is that happens. Yeah. And I'm going to recommend you talk to this organization, right? So you talk about, karmic debt and what people come back to you, that comes back. Where it's not just say, hey, I give you these types of deals, you give me these. But for the person you can trust with those types of transactions, maybe it's a physician loan, maybe it's a construction to permanent, maybe it's a rehab loan, a reverse mortgage. It doesn't matter. There are some specific niche scenarios that you're like, you know what, you're too important. Your referral partner that referred you to me, or my referral partner, is too important for me to like screw this up. That guy or gal is really good at that. You should work with that person. That comes back. And I think it comes back also in the person that maybe you did business with. They'll recommend you to somebody like, hey, this guy was upstanding, said, we can do that, but we're terrible. You should use these people.
There's something about doing that too that like just fucking feels good, right? Because you're like, I'm getting nothing out of this except they will, because I know that they're going to be better
selfishly, some things that are not typical, I think there's a stress there too, right? Like, I can't mess this up.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
So hold on, you're buying a log cabin. It's not built yet.
Yeah, right.
And you're flying in the logs from Oregon. Like, I'm sure we have something that can do that.
And I don't know if I don't know if you've noticed this, but like a lot more of those deals are happening right now. Are you noticing? Like, dude, we get the craziest shit. And I'm
we do.
Fuck. On one hand, it's like you want the loan, right? And it's like, what capacity does your team have to be able to do it and research it, even if it's not something you typically do, versus they're going to spend all this time and energy, and they might be better suited spending that time and energy on what it is we're good at and referring that out. How do you make that distinction? Or is it just sort of an intuition in the moment?
Yeah, I think experience. So it becomes the intuition of the moment, right? You just know that. I mean, if anybody grew up playing sports, you just know passing it in this split second subconsciously is the right thing to do, versus you getting the glory for the buzzer shot. So I think you learn that with experience. We all get burned. We've all taken that transaction, the $3 million spaceship house that, nobody's lending out. Like, I'll figure this one out. And again, these are all adages that I've taken over the years. What's funny, and we'll talk about the lending and real estate industry, the deals that are what we would say the easiest, right? And they're very few right now, you're right, but there's still some scenarios that are really good. The ones that do really well, ironically, everybody's so happy at the end that you would then end up like, wow, that was so seamless. I'm going to start working with you, right? I'm going to refer you to my coworkers if it's the borrower. And the reverse happens. I don't know if this is psychology or anything behind this, but you could come in, you could be the sixth lender. You actually saved the deal. It's been under escrow for 9 weeks. You said it perfectly earlier, like you could do this thing in 2 weeks and everybody's still pissed off.
Yeah.
Like, can you close faster?
Yeah.
Like, hold on.
Yeah.
I just got to the party. I didn't ruin your party earlier. And so that's like the person aspect. The information piece that I find as well, you talk about, is there more income or how would that work? Being a true business professional, businesses solve problems, right? The most successful ones do, right? They don't trick somebody into, hey, buy my secret thing, $7 or that can happen, and that does, but that's not really how you build trust and you build a solid foundation for a business. You build it on solving a problem, right? One problem at a time. And so the other piece is if I'm connecting people with, let's say, information, not just a person, hey, this software would do well for you. And this is going to sound super easy, but a lot of places, if it's truly like work, I have to go build like a funnel or an automation for something. If you introduce somebody to an organization that can do that better, more efficiently, a lot of times they'll pay an affiliate type fee for you. Or sometimes might be talking to somebody like, hey, can I just pay you for this, right? So there's opportunities, I think, just they trust that you're pointing them in the right direction. And then they look at it and say, hey, this is still maybe a little too difficult for me to do this. Could you help me with this? And so that multiplied times, as many conversations you can have, I think at the end of the day, you got to talk to more people.
Well, great point. So I want to talk about this for a second. So, I don't know who said it, but it's like you can have the best product, but the best product, the best service doesn't always win, right? It's the most well-known product or service. You could have a subpar product or service, but if you're the most known, you're going to do better. So how do you think the mortgage industry is changing, right? I can't really put my finger on it, but I feel like the way it always has been, at least for me, is very old school, man. It's why I was attracted to the core. It's very much face-to-face, belly-to-belly. And ironically, a lot of those relationships that I've built over the last decade are now coming full circle, and they're super important. But there's sort of this, I feel like this shift that's happening where it's becoming more about data, automation, content, but yet there's so much out there, right? I think for the average person, maybe not even the average person, maybe the above average person, even I'm looking at this stuff going, dude, all of it seems great. Like, but how do I really know if it's great or if it's something I can trust? I mean, this is why I think so much of it is going to be about personal brand, because it's funny, corporations want to have a conscience, right? So the corporation, the company, they're always trying to like humanize themselves so that people trust them. The individual has always tried to do the opposite, right? They always want to create this brand, this corporate brand, and become larger than life.
System, yeah.
And it's right. But now it's like everyone's starting to see, I think, how impactful the personal brand is, because you have the ability to watch content or to follow an individual and go, dude, okay, I've watched this guy, 13 times on his or her podcast, or I've seen them do social media stuff. And you can't even put your finger on it sometimes, but you're like, I just trust them. And then whatever they're selling, I'm buying, right? Like I don't have to question it because I've spent time with them and I trust them. And I think that's my personal opinion where things are really headed. And I think we're just on the cusp of it. I mean, we're kind of in this universe. So to us, it's probably like already there. And I would say it's not already there. Like it's almost there. Like it's building, right? But like where it's going to be 10 years from now is going to be totally different. Where do you think the industry's headed? What do you think data, automation, and content, what role does that play in the future of the mortgage industry?
So AI, big buzzword. You can't AI or automate, nor should you, to be honest, because I'm sure somebody will say, look at this cool tool. You can't automate relationships, right? At the end of the day, you're exactly right. The people want to do business with a person, with a brand that they trust, right? If I call somebody's customer service line, I have an issue with my cell phone bill, right? This is rhetorical, why do we start yelling into the phone operator, representative, pushing 0 a bunch of times, right? The company screwed up because they made their process more efficient for the company. They didn't make it easier for me. So ironically, what they could do is create a more efficient automation for me to get to the right person. Right. To them, they think it's easy if I just, please talk to me about what it is you're looking for. I can say I need help with my bill, and they're like, oh, you need an address, or you need to update your billing zip code. Like, no, I need.
Dude, by the way, let me just interject really quick because I was dealing with eBay the other day. I was selling something. And
eBay still exists.
Yeah, eBay's still around. But they were returning this item because they're like, oh, the description didn't match what you were selling. I was like, fuck. So I call eBay customer service, which is like impossible to find, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to get to the like contact us and all the fucking steps. And this guy gets on the phone and I'm like, initially, I'm really impressed. This guy's really cool. And I was pissed, and this guy's super cool. But then it dawned on me that he was really just placating. Like it was just this, he had been taught to be super calm. No matter what I said, it's like he had this canned response.
Person
yes,
call.
But the outcome wasn't ever going to change.
Yeah.
And so when it dawned on me that this was the case, it almost made me more upset. Anyway, keep going.
But it's true. But even that aspect, right? They can make it easier to get in touch with somebody.
For sure.
All we really want is, I want in my own language, I don't mean like what language you speak, English, Spanish, but that too. But I just want to ask my question and I want to receive the answer as efficiently as possible. And that's what you can automate. That actually would make you feel better for the brand. I don't care if I'm talking to a AI bot. I don't want me to be mid-sentence and it interrupts me. And it's like, oh, did you ask me about, our specials? Like, no, I didn't. I'm looking for something specific. And so not to go down, too much of a rabbit hole with businesses should use it in a different way where they're trying to give you what you wanted, which was an outcome, right? On the flip side, I think most everybody's reasonable, or to be honest, I think anybody that's been in any of these industries for more than a couple of years, you got a good filter of like, I'm not working with that type of person, right? That was a good exercise, not to show this, but I had a coach at one point that said, instead of saying all the stuff you want to focus on, all the niches you want to work with, let's do the reverse. Why don't you start writing down some transactions that you'll do, but you won't chase. And that was actually pretty impactful. Like, I actually don't really want to work with investors. And I don't mean somebody flipping their primary and turning it into a rental. Sure. I mean, if I'm in between somebody and their 17th property, it is a transaction to them.
Totally.
I don't operate that way, right? So that's not, so if somebody works with me, obviously I'll help them. But if they leave, I'm not chasing them. Does that make sense? Same thing with some of these other trickier, transactions, the log cabin from flying in from Oregon. And so same aspect, but I know we're bouncing around here a little bit, but with branding and what you can do to personalize, some of these aspects, even if you're just a solopreneur, you're off on your own, you can embrace some technologies. Right now we're in this podcast, right? A lot of times if somebody calls you, you have a voicemail. Nobody's typically leaving voicemails anymore. Mm-hmm. If they're calling you about the business that you operate in, what are they doing? They're calling the next person.
For sure.
Typically, right? So, there are ways that you can efficiently have like an automated response. And I see a lot of people with these text messages, hey, saw you just called. Sorry, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you after? Mm-hmm. Like that simplistic automation. Even if somebody knows that, no, that's a robot. You've probably received those texts. I receive them. Yeah. I text the person back. Oh, no problem.
Yeah. It's a
Get back to me whenever.
Totally.
And sometimes you have the automations on your phone, right? You can just click the button, like, can't talk now, I'll call you later. But you feel heard, right? That's where I was going to with the big giant companies. Hey, I was reaching out, you heard me, and then you'll get back to me. Now you have to get back to that person, because that also happens. You call somebody and I'll get back to you in 5 minutes, and then
that's 2 days.
2 days.
Holy shit.
And so I think embracing it with how your own brand that you want to show up is going to be important. I think with the ability for us to push, and this is more of a coaching thing that I wanted to allude to, and I want to see what you're doing in your business, but we have the ability right now more than ever to hit the one-to-many concept. Right? I can be impactful to way more people when we're doing a podcast like this, when I'm teaching a class online.
For sure.
Now you're going to always have the deepest impact face-to-face, which you'll never lose that. But you could do alone in another state. You don't physically need to be there. You can give your advice. You can give, better advice likely than maybe somebody that's at a call center. So what do you think about that? I kind of want to ask you about that. Like that's a version of automation, like just being able to systemize what you do and reach more people.
I think that's what I'm always thinking about is like, how do I reach more people with the same message? I also think you do need to place an importance on what gives you the most amount of energy, right? Like I was doing a class last week and it was the first
online or in person?
In person here at the office. It was the first in-person class, and I've done a ton of classes, but this was the first one I'd done in a couple months. And it was just, dude, the energy was high. The room was packed. Not everybody, but most of the agents that were in this class were like, hey, I've got this client that I need to introduce you to. I've got this client. Or it was like, let's set up a one-on-one and talk. And I talked to my team after that, and I said, man, we just need to do more of this. Like, I think sometimes we think that spending a bunch of time working on a PowerPoint or promoting an event, it's a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy, at least in my experience. I mean, I feel like there's somebody out there where they just like hit a fucking button and like everybody shows up. And I'm like, I want that, right? Yeah. But in my experience, it's taken a lot of hard work. Like I've got a call for usually 2-3 weeks in advance. I got to promote the hell out of the event. I'm doing Slack broadcast. I'm doing bomb videos. I'm doing everything I can to try to get people there. And
those are appropriate automations. When you go back to that I think setting up those systems for you to do that, whether it was your team or not, that's what everybody should be leaning into right now is setting up, because not to separate momentum though, you were on a roll and I'm good at stopping you. But I like that concept. That feels good. To receive all the, you come in, right? Phone call, a text message, a voicemail drop, the bomb video, right? Like you mentioned earlier that now people will trust you. They're almost going to let you down. Like, hey, didn't show up.
Sorry, I didn't come.
Everything okay?
Which almost makes it just as impactful as if they did show up. Totally. Because it's like we've always heard, right? Fortune is in the follow-up. You can still do follow-up and say, hey, sorry you missed this one. We want to make sure you come to the next one, or how's business going? I think, and I don't know if this is just like a moment in time, but there's a big part of me that's really kind of burnt out, dude, with like calling real estate agents. And like, I feel kind of shitty admitting that, but then I always look back to like, okay, why is that the case? Am I the best version of myself that I can possibly be? And there's room for improvement, right? And when it comes to actually prospecting, like, dude, and it was a big lesson. It was like, if I could just have my team work on the event and promote the event, and I just show up and teach it, dude, we're going to crush it. Like, our production's going to improve as a result of it. But when I come in once a week and I'm like, I've got this list of agents I need to call and I've got to make these phone calls, it just becomes almost boring, right? And it's sometimes I wonder if I'm not being proud of my own impact, or I'm not giving myself enough credit for believing that I make impactful phone calls where other people actually learn from them, but it wouldn't seem like it because a lot of voicemails.
Well,
right?
Think about, and this makes me think about this with myself, and I don't sit there and dwell like, all right, Joey, be an impactful connector,
It just happens.
But I'll give you that as my thought.
It happens because your energy in that moment is impactful and you're feeling compelled to connect with that person.
But if you're making these calls, this is what I'm getting at, that you making a phone call to a real estate agent, if you genuinely are calling with the goal of, we'll make up a name, Sarah. Hey, Sarah, what connection do you need? Do you need a connection to a person? Do you need a connection to information? You would say it in your own words. But if you're truly leading your conversation with that, I don't pump myself up in the mirror and make phone calls and say, this is what I'm going to do. But if you truly are leading with, then the calls
with value
are correct. Well, I'm going to joke here. You might have an agent that says, well, I could use more listings. Great. Guess what I'm teaching on Tuesday? How to get more listings. Do you want to come to my class, right? You're not just invited into the class. Like, hey, what is it that I can help you with? Like, how are you doing, right? Any connections I can make for you? Any information, anything out there? Mortgage companies all the time are coming out with new products, right? That always have 1,300 words of disclosures and well, the only person that qualifies for this is nobody. And, and even if it was good, but do you need me to break that down? Maybe that is a better scenario for somebody. But a lot of times what it really is it's a social media post to remind everybody I exist, right? It's an awareness post. Hey, I exist. We're going to offer this, $50,000, slam dunk scenario of no down payment required, all these things. Maybe that exists, but maybe there's a caveat. Let's unpack that. But that's what they're doing. They're reminding you that they exist. And so I think if you are doing an outreach, whether it's cold, warm, warmer, that's always going to do well for you. Is I'm going to lead this with, how can I help you? What kind of a connection can I make for you?
Hey, what about like agents or like how often are you updating that list of agents that you're trying to stay in front of, right? So let's just say it's a list of 50 or 50 that's in a top tier. You've got another 100, right? And then you've got 250 total that are just like you're marketing to. How often are you going through those lists where you're like updating it, moving people into the top tier, moving people out of the top tier? And how are you determining those tiers? Is it based on production? Is it based on relationship? Or is it a combination of both? Because a lot of the people that did a bunch of production 2 years ago, they're not doing a bunch of production today. But if the relationship's still there, I feel like it still makes sense to be in front of those people.
Again, this is
but that is about time, right? It's about how do you leverage your time?
This is probably more of the experience versus somebody that started today. What's easier to say for you and I than for somebody to do. But regardless of what your list is, we're talking mortgage, real estate, and everything. It really doesn't matter. If you have a list of people that ideally can help your business and you can ideally help them, like there's a partnership, that's the key. That's who's on the list. Who can you truly partner with? Now, we all have an inherent selfishness, right? I want more loans, so I'm going to go call more real estate agents. There's an inherent selfishness. But again, if you really are trying to be an impactful connector and try to create partnerships, genuinely, you were mentioning production and everything. If somebody is not draining you, they truly are a partner of yours. They value you, the advice, how you represent yourself and your business. I don't care if you do one deal a year with that person. They should stay on the list, right? How would you feel if you were on a list, like, well, there's some organizations that work with the mortgage industry. Right now, we don't have too many refinances to throw around, right? You can feel some of the folks that have just completely like distanced themselves from you. I see some folks on the title side, on some insurance sides, that whenever we do have an influence on the transaction, typically it's for a refinance. I see some people leaning way further in, right? Like you do know how many refis I've done, like it's a negligible amount, and they're still leaning, no, I care about you, Joey. You could feel that, right?
For sure.
So same thing. So I would say for the list, now of course you can't just have a bunch of people that don't do any business and they're the socialites, but that partnership is my recommendation. And again, it's industry agnostic. Real estate agents should be doing the same thing. If they're out there talking to business owners, it shouldn't be, that small business, let's say whatever they sell, I want to be their in-house real estate agent for anybody that moves into the state or moves out, whatever it is. Well, I haven't done a deal with them for 8 months, so let's take them off my list. I mean, delete the people as fast as humanly possible that drain you. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got me all hyped up.
Yeah, no, I agree. What about let's talk more about data and content. Like, what are you seeing in the space? Do you think people are leaning into that and wanting to know more? Or do you feel like there's still this pushback of like doing things the old school way?
So I was talking to a good friend of mine. She's a real estate agent, and I'm going to steal this from her, but I love it. It's the last mile effect, right? All these quote unquote disruptors, whether they're these iBuyers, the big Z monster that's in the room, on the real estate side, all these disruptions that are coming in, what they haven't cracked is just they aren't cracking the last mile, right? Getting to the finish line. They're really good at nurturing business. I get an email all the time from Zillow. I'm always clicking on it and reading it. Zillow knows every mountain property my wife's looking at. They know we're going to go buy a mountain house, right? I mean, I'm joking here, but they have data. You talk about data. What they haven't done is shot me a personalized email like, hey, it looks like you've been looking at this mountain community. Here's a couple of houses that I personally, my name's Frank, I personally looked these up for you. And if you ever have any questions or anything, just let me know. I'm making this up, but that's kind of the last mile effect. Hey, whenever you're ready, we know it takes years sometimes to buy a second home. It looks like you are looking up in the mountains. And I'm making that up, but that concept, I don't believe you're ever going to disrupt with any of these technologies. The data exists, but nobody's capitalizing on it because there's human effort, right? And so I don't believe that last mile is going to be disrupted anytime soon. Now, I think on the flip side, and maybe this is just me being a little anxiety driven with, I don't like to see myself, and think about it for yourself. I don't want to be a lead. That just feels weird, right? You're going to go buy leads. Like just because I clicked on a Facebook ad that said, do you want to see pictures of 123 Main Street? I'm a lead that gets sold to 40 real estate agents. Like that just feels weird, right? Trigger leads. Like I'm trusting my mortgage professional to do a transaction for me, maybe buy a new house, maybe refinance. The 30 phone calls that are coming in trying to help and offer me a better rate or better service. I don't like that. None of us like being a lead, right? We don't want to be a lead. And same thing, we were talking about prospecting for business and agents. I mean, we all do it, but if you truly look at it as like, how am I going to help you? What kind of a connection can I make for you? The partnership. So ask me a couple more questions on data. Maybe I'm derailing myself.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Because that is a big space that I'm going very deep into is a lot of data.
Well, talk to us about what you're doing.
So this is going to be a dad joke here, but if our phones were listening to us, people can joke that they are, that data would have to be stored somewhere, right? There's data warehouses,
National
allegedly,
Yeah.
but they exist, right? Anybody's listening to this, some of the biggest ones out there, Apollo.io is a huge repository for data, right? And I hate that I'm going to mention big businesses, but we've all heard of Home Depot. If I'm looking at refrigerators or toilets or something on Home Depot, that data exists. Like they know I clicked on a refrigerator or a toilet or a hammer or a ceiling fan. That data exists, right? It exists somewhere. So I've gone down this pretty deep rabbit hole of using the data, but like at the street level, right? These billion-dollar companies are all using it to influence behavior, not just showing an ad in front of me, but just understanding, this all started, however long ago, Target would know that your spouse was pregnant before you did just because of like patterns, right? So data is not new, but I think if you can understand.
Did you hear of that story, by the way? I think it was in the book Habit that the guy Charles Duhigg.
I remember the idea of it, but yeah.
Dude. So there's this guy. He keeps getting. Remember the old? I don't know if they still do them or not. I feel like I don't get them anymore. But Target used to do these big postcards, right, with coupons, right? It was either like 20% off this or $10 off.
His daughter was pregnant.
Yeah,
was it?
Yeah. So like he's getting like a stroller and diapers and like little baby bottles and all the shit, right? And he's like, what is this shit that I keep getting from Target? So it goes down to the Target to talk to the manager, and it's like, why are you sending this? It's made out to my daughter. My daughter's 16 years old. Turns out she was pregnant.
Yeah.
So they were able to predict.
Yeah,
they were able to predict.
But so all of that has existed. Again, me talking about Zillow, knowing about my wife, me talking about, anything that our phones are listening to us and you get an ad, in front of it. But what does somebody do that last mile? And I think that's what I really have been diving into. There's a ton of these warehouses. You can go buy data. You can actually go buy a buyer intent data. That's what a lot of these large lead aggregators for the real estate industry, what they're selling. If somebody's clicking on a handful of real estate related pictures or posts or anything, they're more than likely closer to the transaction of buying or selling a house than somebody that's, just cold internet traffic that some people try to target as well, or they try to trick people into it. It's a little obnoxious. QR codes, phone numbers, text me, call me.
Okay.
You can talk to our AI thing. There's a bunch of ways. But then a concept, again, these are all things that I'm firing off at you. Had no thought of the direction of this conversation. I thought you were going to have me pull out my deep, dark secrets, which you can do if you want. But just from some tactical advice, there's have a lot of off-ramps. Have people get in touch with you any way that you can. And then the other piece is you got to remember, if somebody gives your card to somebody, whether it's a virtual, real card, whatever, there's a reverse cold call that takes place. And somebody taught me this, and I use it a lot. For that client to call me, they call you, you're excited, but they're cold calling you.
Sure.
Right? I give my business card to somebody, this young lady that closed this today. She gives it to somebody at her company. The business card on their desk, in their pocket. We've all had those. How many times have you looked at a business card like, I'm not going to call the guy, right? Because there's a reverse cold call taking place. So that's why I was saying that make it easier for people to find you and like interact with you, because people are always watching us a lot of times way before they even interact with us. That's back to your personal branding. People are looking you up, and it's not just how do you look up on LinkedIn, what do your reviews say on Google? That's part of it. But I think people are devouring more and more content from you. They might not listen to a full 1 hour podcast. If you have like 100 they might not listen to all that, but they're watching the trends that you're doing. Like, what is it that you're trying to put out there? YouTube videos. I doubt that somebody's really watching a series on buying your first home. There's 30 videos, let's say, making this up. I'm sure some channel out there has this. That people are researching this individual. That's great, but then where's the way to connect with you, I guess is what I'll say. So kind of losing my train of thought with that, but yeah.
Cool. So data, what about content? Do you think that that's something that people are doing well right now, or do you think it's something that people are doing poorly?
All of it. So, and I catch myself in this as well, right? So what's the reason that I'm doing something? Right? Not just like a what's in it for me, but a lot of times if I get a script on, all right, I know I should be posting on social, I know I should be doing all these things. Even if somebody comes across very well, like, wow, you're polished on camera, everything looks good. If that's not really who they are, if and when you end up interacting with them in person, we've all met that person like, wow, like you show up really good on camera, everything's great, but they're super awkward in person. And I've got a ton of these examples that I actually like want to run away from these people as fast as possible. Like you were truly engaging on camera. I loved your content. I go and meet them at a conference. When I go give them a hug, like I know them, right? They're like my best friend. And it's not that they're standoffish or they're cold to you. It's just, that's not who they were, right? That was their stage. And, you know, they're some money hungry, just talk to my assistant. We've all been around
Sure.
these folks, but then there's the ones that you're like, wow, like, and we've all seen this, and I have energy for this, you know, a lot. Like, wow, like he was nicer in person than I would have imagined. Like you were exactly what I thought. Like that just feels good. That deepens the connection. And so this is probably a money-making thing for somebody. I don't know how you do this, but if you could really pull out the natural of somebody and digitize that, like create a digital twin, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's an AI, that would work really well, right? Because there are both ends. There's people that are just super charismatic in person. I kind of want to feel like I'm this way. I get a little like odd on video sometimes, right? But if somebody was able to pull out of me like, hey, the way you naturally are connecting with people and the way you are, can I just digitize that a little bit more? Like, let me have this film crew follow you around. I'll figure out where you end up, because we all shift a little bit. And I'm not nervous about filming a video or a selfie. To me, that's just not a natural thing that I do. And so that's I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's normal for most people to not feel natural with it, right? I don't think.
But I don't mean about not natural on camera. Just, I don't tell my family like what I'm eating for dinner. So why am I going to go take a video of it and like show them?
Yeah, it's just the law of the observer, right?
Yeah.
It's like anytime you it could be a camera, it could be another human being. Anytime there is something that is observing you, there's going to typically be a different display of emotion, a different display of conversation. And I think that it's just practice, because you're right, it's not normal. I think it's like you look at an actor who first begins and they're totally different 10 years later, right? A great actor, they've developed the ability to extract the real version of themselves and just display it on the camera. But I think sometimes when we feel like we're being judged, I mean, it all comes down to human emotion, right? We want to be loved. We want to be liked. We want people to think highly of us. And so a lot of it's posturing and positioning. And how can I make the camera feel like I'm worthy of being liked? And I think that that's just ego, right? Our ego is protecting us from shame and embarrassment, right? And so we're going to do everything we can to not feel ashamed and embarrassed of what we do. But really, it's the dude that's not on camera, that's not sharing it with the world. They're the ones with the biggest ego, because they're hiding it from everybody instead of sharing it freely.
That's a good point. I thought you were going to figure out that I'm just lazy.
I don't think you're lazy, bro.
That's what I know. I'm being honest. Like, I would love to post more. I get in habits of in spurts of doing it. And then I'm like, so I mean, I'd probably just have to hire someone to do this stuff.
It's like what you were saying earlier, where and this isn't to knock on anybody that approaches it this way. I think this is just the human condition, we tend to think about how we will be perceived when somebody is watching because they're watching. And so it's like, but really if you can put yourself in the state of mind where like, what is it that I'm offering? What is it I'm offering and how can I help that individual? Then it becomes less about you. And instead of, like everyone's talking about creating content, and I think it's like, no, you don't have to create shit. You just document it. Just document what you're doing. But the problem is too many of us feel that what we're doing isn't worthy of being documented, right? But to somebody it is. Like to somebody's going to listen to this conversation and be like, oh, that was fucking gold, right? Oh, wow. I didn't even think about what Joey just said. So I think it's just a matter of doing it. And I think over time, you find your unique voice and you find what it is that's helping other people. And you just share more of that. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back to, you're exactly right, that if I try to help somebody by being an impactful connector of information or people, you're right. Just me talking about, hey, I just met this individual. If anybody needs this type of whatever,
that's it.
Call them.
That's it.
Yeah. No, that's good to have that succinct. Where do you believe this market's going? Right. We're almost into June, which is crazy. 2024.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a grind for another year. I think next year we'll just see changes. And I think a lot of those changes will be a result, unfortunately, of the election. I just think that, look, it's like there's 80% of the people out there believe, whether it's right or wrong, they believe that our president is going to dictate their life. The president's going to dictate, what happens to the economy, and the reality is like, if you're the man that you want to be, that you're worthy of being, and you put in the work to become the best version of yourself, it doesn't matter what happens to the market. The market's going to be in the market, like you were saying earlier. But I think, when do I think rates will maybe change? Maybe they never change.
Yeah, maybe they go higher.
Maybe they go higher. So I always tell people like, look, dude, if rates go higher, thank God you're buying now. Right? But I don't know. I don't think they will. I think they will improve. I think there will be some more leniency. I think a lot of it's still shock. I think a lot of people are like, man, 3 to 8 or 7 or whatever, 6, right? It's all high in comparison to what a lot of people entering the market were exposed to. For whatever reason, they decided to wait. Why? Because they fucking had to. Nobody had $100,000 to pay over what the property was worth, which is now why a lot of people buying are people that they're maxing out their debt to income ratio. Their credit's not perfect. They don't have $100,000 to spend on top of what the house is worth. Home prices have gone up. So I think it's just, they're more challenging transactions right now. I think that'll change, but I think it's going to take a little time.
It's interesting you brought up the political nature, and obviously an election year, it's always going to be tough. I don't know this person, so I'm also in this boat, but you're right that we pay way more attention to some fictitious, not fictitious, but like a figurehead for the country, whoever they are, where that person typically is not going to affect my day-to-day life as much as the guy or gal who voted for the red light camera outside my house.
Right.
Like a block from my house, there's this damn red light camera. It stresses me out every time I drive through it. I mean, back and forth. And that person literally affects my life on a daily basis way more than whoever's sitting in the presidential chair, right, in the White House. And so you're right that we got to focus on what we can focus on, right? The vote of wherever that red light camera came from, I should figure out who they are.
Yeah. Hunt them down.
Hunt them down.
Go stalk them.
Vote against them. But
set up a tripod and a camera at their
But it was good for me to hear you say that, because we all have to refocus, right? Instead of hanging on to Jerome Powell's every word, what he said, was that hawkish? Was that dovish?
Yeah, right.
We're sitting there watching.
What does that mean?
But it's true. Yeah. And we're observers versus being actors, right? Taking action. I think I was bringing this up earlier today. That's where my energy is. I want to go take action. You talked about the data stuff. I kind of went all over the place with. You talked about, the automations and there's some AI stuff. And I want to take action. If there is something that's out there, you asked about me going out and, figuring out a lot of these, maybe it's a marketing tactic or a ploy. I want to go learn it, because if it works, I want to know about it, right? Why wouldn't I want that extra,
the edge?
I feel that I'm always behind, which is ironic because when I talk to people like, hey, did you see this tool? No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I talked to a guy yesterday that I got introduced to. He runs like a multi-billion-dollar fund, and he's in Silicon Valley. And I'll preface this whole thing with the way we got introduced was interesting, but regardless, we're just meeting each other, right? And I treat everybody. I don't need anything from you. I kind of want to know like how I can help you, and I think that comes across well. So I didn't even know who this guy was. Now people would argue and say you should probably look these guys up before you meet them. And I looked him up on LinkedIn after. I was like, oh shit, this guy's big time. And same thing. Just I was bringing up some of these tools, and he owns a couple of real estate organizations, like big time stuff. Or the fund that they have has an influence on that. And I started bringing up some of these tools, and I said, hey, but you know about this thing and this thing. He's like, he's figuratively like writing down notes.
That's amazing.
He couldn't keep up with me. And I'm like, you didn't know about these things? And so a lot of times I feel that I'm behind. That's also why I like to do a lot of this stuff. I like to devour content, and there's never enough time in the day, right? And it's not a chasing of a shiny object, because I think that's assuming you're going to throw everything into this new idea. I want to just know what the hell it is. And if it's great, I'm telling everybody about it. You've been on these phone calls. Derek, look what I found. You have to go do this, right? Yeah. I've curated it. And that's powerful, because if you could be the guy that connected somebody to the right person, there's the book. Is it, I can never pronounce the guy's name.
Connector's Way?
No. Never Eat Alone. Can never pronounce the guy's name. Farazi or Ferozi. Okay. So great book. It's like an orange book, and I'm probably going to butcher this as well. But a lot of the concepts that I can recall from that book, and I read this thing quite a long time ago, but the author was really pushing the notion of be known as the person that connected two people. If you could connect two business owners that maybe would have never met, and their businesses both explode, you're the reason. Right. And it's nothing that you're trying to, like you were talking about earlier, monetizing. How do I monetize that? That comes back because now when they have an opportunity, maybe for an investment, or you can come in, you're getting that phone call. And that's also been impactful. Like the guy that I talked to yesterday, he was talking about a bunch of cool things that he basically said, like, hey, I got to have you sign a couple NDAs, but I think what you're looking at, you should look at what we're doing. Love to involve you in this. Right.
Dude, and it goes back to what you just said a few minutes ago, which is like you're one relationship away from totally changing your life forever, man. Right. And it's like, but I think it all stems back to belief. You've got to have some internal belief in what you're doing, even if you haven't had the result yet. And I think that's just being quiet, getting quiet, really spending some time with yourself. And you've got an honesty. You've got to be truthful with yourself and go, do I actually believe, even if the result isn't there, do I believe that this is where it's headed? Do I believe that there's some value? And I think, like, dude, we already know the answers, right? But we're in the society where there's so much fucking shit that we have to pay attention to that it dilutes our ability to practice self-honesty and tap into that intuition. But when we do it, it's like, the difference between being convicted of something and having belief and not, and just sort of like you're hiding from it. You're putting stuff around it to make you think that it's valuable, and really it might not be. In your case, I think what you're doing is super valuable. And I think the testament to that is this $1 billion hedge fund dude that's like taking fucking notes from you. Yeah. Right? You're probably sitting there going, well, wait a minute. I was supposed to be taking notes from you, and here you are taking notes from me. And I think that's because he's probably so in the world that he's in.
Totally.
But yet having something that can be a parallel to the world he's in is valuable, dude. So anyway, dude, Brother, thanks for coming on the show. Hey, where can people find you?
Normal channels, Instagram, LinkedIn.
What's your Instagram?
Joey Abdullah.
Joey Abdullah, at Joey Abdullah.
Uh-huh. At Joey Abdullah.
LinkedIn.
I think that's everything. Facebook,
Cool.
LinkedIn.
Mortgages,
Twitter.
data automation, marketing. All right, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for
Turn
coming
that
on.
loss to a check. Every time that I see a limit, what? I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first. The one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck. Nah, I had to